Guys, I've got some bad news to tell you. Hell is real and there's several of them on Earth right now. Hey, Slavic Vikings, but what do I mean by this? Is hell actually real? Well, spoiler alert, no, hell is not actually real. Oh wait, no, that's actually controversial. We don't know if hell is real, but there is places on Earth called hell, and also there's places that we could metaphorically call hell, like fires that have been burning for tens of years, hottest place on Earth, poisonous water storages, etc. And in this video, I'll be exploring these different metaphorical and semantical hells. If you like this video, you also probably like geography, and I've got good news, since on my channel I've got a playlist with all my geography videos, which I'm sure you'll like. But I've also got other playlists that might interest you, like history, philosophy, and much more. And also, I would just like to remind you that the subscribe and like button exists. Starting with the example that made me originally make this video, we start our journey in Poland. But where? Well, let's zoom in the north of Poland. You might know this city called Gdańsk, or formerly known as Danzig when the Germans owned it. And above this city is a long penis called Hel, or the Hel Peninsula. And on the very tip of this Hel Peninsula is a small village called Hel. However, the English spelling of Hell uses two L's, this place only has one L, so take the L on that one. Despite having only around 4,000 people, Hel is extremely popular in Poland. Everybody knows about this weirdly shaped peninsula, and it is a very popular tourist and summer destination. Speaking of this weirdly shaped peninsula, that is actually the origin of the name, since in Old Polish, and by the way this place has existed for hundreds of years, I'll get into that in a second, in Old Polish, Hel with one L meant fork or branch. It doesn't mean that anymore, trust me, I know Polish. But that is interesting that it is named fork or branch after the weird shape of this peninsula. But how did this weird peninsula form? So Poland is actually extremely high up, it's above all of the US, and therefore it had the Ice Age, and a pretty severe one, a couple thousand of years ago I think the Ice Age was. But anyway, when the glaciers melted, this place got filled up with water, and then sand got moved because of waves, and sand piled up over time, but that was not enough to create this peninsula. Those were the geographic reasons for this to form. Another two factors that caused this place to exist is plants. This place was very rich and still is in nature and plants and trees, and the roots of these plants helped this place to keep it together during storms, etc. And also there was a lot of human interventions throughout the centuries to make this peninsula whole and not break up. Like for example the one in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka was once connected to India, but because of a storm now Sri Lanka is an island. This place ain't only for tourists, since this place has a very long and strong military history. And that makes sense, since you can guess its strategic location in the protection of Polish biggest cities of Gdańsk and Gdynia, one of the biggest cities, but also it's extremely strategic for control over the Baltic Sea. And therefore, over the years, Hel has had many different fortifications that you can see right now. And even near the village of Hel, there is a very cool museum about the coastal defense of this peninsula. And actually, this place is such a good strategic location that in World War II, when Hitler invaded Poland, this was one of the last places that fell to the Nazis. And after World War II, when Poland became the puppet state of the Soviet Union knew the value of this peninsula and invested a lot in the defense of this place. And nowadays, many of the military installations have been decommissioned because of NATO and stuff, but now it is just mostly focused on tourism, and good for them, am I right? I don't know why I rambled so much about this hell in Poland, but instead let me go a bit faster in the next examples. Instead talking about this semantical hell of Poland, now let's talk about the metaphorical hell in the USA. That being, you probably know it, in California, the Death Valley. and Death Valley is the hottest place on Earth. It has the hottest recorded temperature on Earth, and, you know, literal hell is known where you burn forever, so therefore it makes sense that Death Valley could be considered hell, you know what I mean. Let's move on to Hell, Michigan, a place called Hell in Michigan, USA, this time with 2 L's, the proper spelling of hell. So this is a very forested area with only 72 people. Before getting into the weird quirks of this place, let me tell you about the origin of the name. So there are many different folk stories about the origin of the name. Some about the Germans I'm gonna skip, but one of the most common ones comes from the 1830s, where according to legend, George Reeves, an early settler, was asked what he thought the town should be named. And his response was, "Call it Hell for all I care." And the name stuck. Now, isn't that just hilarious? Another story suggests that the name came from the difficult conditions encountered by settlers. And it makes sense, since this place only has 72 people. That kind of proves that it was hard to settle, and it also is caused by this place having very swampy land and very harsh winters. In typical US capitalist fashion, this place has fully embraced its goofy ass name, since it has many different hell-themed restaurants, ice cream places, even hell-themed events like Run Through Hell, which is a series of road races varying in length. There's t-shirts where you can buy that say "I've been to hell," mugs and stuff. So this is basically just a tiny tourist destination that embraces its name of hell. But let's move on to a bit less capitalistic nation of Ethiopia. So moving once again to a metaphorical hell, not a named hell. The Danakil Depression is a huge place in the Afar Triangle that encompasses Ethiopia and Eritrea, and also a bit of Djibouti, depending on who you ask. And it is one of the hottest places on Earth, on average, right? And it has vast salt pans, active volcanoes, and its alien landscape is extremely similar to what I would consider hell. Just look at these images and tell me that this isn't hell on Earth. Another thing worth mentioning is that it is the 3rd lowest lying location in the continent of Africa, so it is pretty close to hell physically if you believe that hell is underground. But anyway, let's move on to another European example of semantical hell that this time is also grammatically correct, of Hell, Norway. The name Hell in Norwegian can mean luck, so it's not as negative as the previous examples, and that makes sense since I don't know Norwegian, but I know Danish, and in Danish, Held is luck, so that makes sense. And because they're very similar languages. This village also embraces its name, although to a less obnoxious extent than the one in Michigan, by, for example, having signs, and they also sell merchandise with the name Hell on it. And for example, probably the most known place where it's using the word Hell for its branding is the station name, where it says Hell, God's Expedition, as a play of words for the Norwegian saying of goods handling. A British punk band called The Boys also recorded their 3rd album in the village, and as a result named it to Hell with the Boys. Isn't that just hilarious? But you might be asking, well, what's the origin of this place's name? Well, in Old Norse, not modern Norse, but in Old Norse, the word hellir, which meant overhang or cliff cave, referred to the natural caves in the area that were probably used for shelter in ancient times, and therefore the name has nothing to do with the English word hell. Moving back to the USA, let's look at a US example of a metaphorical hell in Pennsylvania. This place is probably the best example of a burning hell, since this place of Centralia, a small town in Pennsylvania, has had a coal mine burning beneath the town since 1962, and it led to almost near total evacuation of the area, with smoke and toxic gases seeping from the ground to this day. So it is literal hell burning from underneath the ground. I don't think there's a better example of hell on Earth. But what caused this fire? Well, basically, in short, there was a landfill which was used for the town dump, and this place caught on fire, and it spread into the very vast coal mines underneath the ground, and that's how this all started. It had around 1,000 residents in 1980, but now it has even less than 10, so this place is totally abandoned. And that makes sense since the fire created many sinkholes and it is releasing toxic gas constantly, and many buildings and homes had to be demolished. In 1984, the government began relocating residents to different places. This has been a bit controversial, with the Americans' obsession on freedom of movement, etc. And all the properties here are now claimed under eminent domain for safety reasons. And there have been numerous attempts to extinguish the fire for many years, mostly in the early years of the fire, but they all have failed, mostly due to actually just inadequate funding. Another example of America's beautiful capitalism. Moving on. The Grand Cayman Islands has a place named Hell. Although, unlike the previous examples, this isn't a settlement or town. Instead, this is just a geological site named Hell because of its appearance. I mean, if you look at these limestone rock formations that have existed for millions of years, they do have a very scary appearance, and I do get why they would name it after Hell. And if you're wondering how these limestone rock formations have formed, it's because of acid rain dissolving the limestone and creating these formations. Very cool, very cool. But what is this Western bias of mine? I've only been covering Western examples. Let's now move into Turkmenistan to look at the door to hell, or the Darvaza gas crater. In 1971, a natural gas field collapsed into an underground cavern. And this resulted in the creation of this scary-ass large crater that has been burning ever since. To me, it's crazy that there are examples of places that have been burning for so long without any human intervention. And the reason they actually set this place on fire is to prevent the methane gas. It's the same reason why oil fields in the sea often have this gas burning, spewing out of the top of them. It's to burn off the harmful gases. So it's actually good that this place is burning. However, scientists did not expect this place to burn for over 15 years. They just expected it to burn off all the gas after a few weeks. And actually, it kind of turned out to be a good thing. Since in a place where there's basically nothing, I mean, just look around Turkmenistan, it's basically a desert with nothing to do. This is basically the biggest tourist attraction of this country. It is a bit scary since the long-term effects of this methane gas being released is kind of unknown, but I would say this is one of the best visual representations of hell on Earth. Okay, remember before this example is when I covered the Grand Cayman Island. That island was actually a British territory. Well, now let's give an example of a French island territory that instead of being in the Mediterranean, it's next to Madagascar. And this place is called Hell-Bourg, straight from a cartoon. And it is located on the island of Réunion. And it is actually crazy how beautiful this village is. It has been awarded the title of one of France's most beautiful villages, and I would love to visit here. The village itself is very small, so it shares the population statistics of the commune surrounding it, which has approximately 7.3 thousand inhabitants, so it is unsure how many exactly the village has population, but it's in the low thousands, definitely. And if you're wondering why this name is called Hell-Bourg, it's actually named after the former governor of this island of Réunion. And excuse my pronunciation, this admiral is called Anne Chrétien Louis de Hel from the 19th century. Now the last example of hell, and the last example will be a metaphorical one, and that being Lake Natron in Tanzania. But why am I calling this lake a hell? Well, two reasons. First of all, just look how red it is, and hell is red, right? But second reason, because of the pH levels being so high in this lake, being as high as 10.5, it is basically inhospitable for most life forms. Wait, actually I have a third reason. The water in this lake can reach up to 60 degrees Celsius, which is insanely warm. And by the way, this lake is extremely huge also. It has an area of around 58 kilometers long and 22 kilometers wide, which is huge. I forgot to mention why the water is red. The water is red because of microorganisms that thrive in this salty warm water. And interestingly enough, the water in this lake is actually pretty shallow. So obviously this video wasn't that serious, however I would like to know which one of these examples in your opinion exemplifies hell the most. Which one of these do you think is the most similar to hell? And I'm talking of course about the metaphorical examples, not the named ones. So I hope you enjoyed these examples of places named hell and places that look like hell. Don't forget to check out the geography playlist and maybe other playlists. Once again reminding you to subscribe if you want to. And as always, farvel, żegnam and goodbye.